Hello everyone, you're listening to NYU Journalism. My name is Athinath, and today we have four really young and one not so young. We have four students from New York City who are going to be talking about their experiences this election year. First of all, so I'm just going to go around the room and each one of you just introduce yourself and just tell us how you feel about the election.
Sure. So my name is Daniel Dornbaum. I'm a senior at Baruch College. And what am I saying? Just stuff about me or just how I feel about the election?
How you feel about the election?
Sure. As a quote-unquote young person, thank you. I'll take it. I think this is my first presidential election that I get to vote in. This is an election cycle that I actually, have real tangible memories of. I was in 8th grade when Obama was first elected into office, and back in 2008. And I remember from the one memory I have of that election is sitting in my middle school gym, gathered around one of those like really tiny televisions on the cart that they wheeled in, and watching his inauguration. But I really didn't play a part in the election process. And in 2012, it was, I was still in high school. I really wasn't, grounded in my political beliefs. And I'm current, today I don't know if I'm fully politically matured, but I'm certainly, I have a lot more thoughts about the election now than I did 4 years ago. But this is monumental. I think that it will really define our country for the next 4, 8, and 50 years. It's not really, we're seeing a tide change in the way people view politics and the way that candidates are portrayed in the media and even the use of media in elections. And I know I tend to ramble, so I guess I'll end it there and turn it over to you folks.
Hi, my name is Gonzalez. I'm currently a freshman at NYU, and I find myself in a very specific situation. I'm not a citizen, so I don't have a direct stake in this election. However, indirectly, I'm very invested. I'm very interested in following politics. I enjoy engaging in conversation, especially this election season. Some of the comments you get, particularly from one side, are very interesting. But I think the most important thing we've learned from this election, results aside, is that one very specific issue that future generations are going to have to deal with seems to be a rise in nativist sentiment. You see that rising in Europe a lot, whether it be Austria or Italy, and now we see it coming up here in the United States also with Donald Trump. As a Hispanic, I was very involved specifically in eliminating stereotypes that were conceived during this election season. Not only Hispanics this election season, whether you're Hispanic, Muslim, in a lot of ways, if you're an African American, there's a lot of subtle ways that the Republican Party made a few comments that were very questionable. But it's the rise of nativism that I think we really, really need to tackle and find a solution how to combat that. So I'll hand it over now.
Hi guys, my name's Aditi. I'm a student at Columbia Journalism School right now, and my situation's kind of weird because I was born here, so I'm a citizen, so I'm going to be voting tomorrow, but I grew up in India for most of my thought-forming years, I would call them, so I've never really been interested in American politics. So when I came here, and that's pretty much all I've been following now. So when Obama became president, we gathered around the TV, we watched his speech, we were like, wow, this guy's great. But that's where it ended. But now it's like I have to physically cast a vote. I have to be part of the decision to make it happen. I can't just watch it play out as it will. And personally, I'm pretty undeclared at the moment. You can hate me, but I don't know who I'm going to vote for. It's really weird. neither candidate has made me want to vote for them. Making me not want to vote for you is different from making me want to vote for you. So it's like, and they give these really vague, broad statements about the economy and ideas, and they don't really delve into the specifications of the details about exactly how they're going to do anything. So that's pretty much what I look for in like an election season or something. And as a journalism student, that's I have a different hat on, and like I'm covering everything from a different point of view.
So my name's Raphael. I'm an undergrad sophomore at Columbia, and I'm just echoing some of the same things. I remember I was in like 5th grade when I heard my principal like gathered everyone into the cafeteria and was like, we're either going to have the first female candidate from a major party or the first black candidate from a major party. And I didn't understand at that time like the significance of that, but I do now. And then to see that play out again this year, where the first female candidate is going up against Trump, is a very interesting election, to say the least.
All right, we got that. There was something that Aldo said about stereotypes that I've always wanted to talk about. This is something that I've felt, even though we haven't been here. I'm not from the US. I've been here only a month, but I've been following the election, like many people. And in the past couple of weeks, the rhetoric about the Indian and the US relations, especially with Trump releasing an ad along with the Modi government back in India. I don't know if you guys have seen that one that goes, Ab ki baar Trump Sarkar, which is terrible to say the least. So I've been conflicted because back home I've seen support for Trump. I know it sounds a little shocking, and nobody my age genuinely supports Trump in my friend circle. Let me be very clear with that. In my friend circle, people don't support Trump, but nor do they support Hillary outrightly. And that's something that I've always wanted to see, because in India we have this thing where the political influence is very limited upon colleges. One of the first things I noticed when I came to NYU, and I took this entire group tour where I met different clubs, was that you guys have Democratic clubs and Republican clubs inside colleges. Whereas in India, college is generally considered well-educated if it does not have any political affiliations whatsoever, if the students there just go there to study. And that's something that I've found to be very interesting, that students here are involved in politics from a very young age. But yeah, coming back to the original point, stereotypes have been brought up very recently in the US, where they are set at such a high stake place, and it is said so very publicly. And I just wanted to get started with that and see where that takes us. Aditi, you said you were undeclared, and I get that, but since you would be voting for someone tomorrow, when do you think you're going to be making that decision?
Literally the second before I put it on the ballot. Also, that may be attributed to my extremely indecisive nature. I mean, it may have nothing to do with politics at all, but like I said before, I mean, if I'm going to take a serious decision about something, I want reasons for it. I don't want reasons against it. That's just the way I am. I mean, I'm pretty sure there are people out there as well. I mean, I can't just say, oh, I'm not going to vote for Trump because he's a crazy-ass lunatic. Or I'm not going to vote for Hillary because she okay, I probably might vote for Hillary. But I wouldn't say I won't. But like I said, so I don't want reasons against. I want reasons for. Oh, I should vote for this candidate because they're going to do this for the schools. They're going to do this for the economy. They're going to do this for, education. And, I haven't seen that come out of this election, which is...
But when candidates are on the campaign trail, they're not going to, go into the nitty-gritty. They're speaking in these broad terms because they're trying to excite an audience. But they do put out, not position papers, but
Yeah.
their stance on hundreds of issues. And so, I mean, I don't really, I'm a little worried when you say, I haven't, I don't know who I'm going to support because neither of them have made me want to vote for them. I personally see the president as a party leader, as a not someone who's, they have thousands and thousands of people researching policy and they're the face of it. They're trying to excite create a movement. That's what politicians are. They have staffers who are spending hours analyzing budgets and they have teams of lawyers working on the laws. Themselves, they're the face. They're the showmanship of politics. They're there to make connections with people and to really right, exactly. And so when you say they haven't really given me a reason to vote for them, well, you're not just voting for them, you're voting for everything that they're standing for and all that work that's being put in behind them.
But then, when you think about it that way, then you need to look at the other parties, the third-party candidates.
Absolutely.
They've put in so much work too, but unfortunately, they're not at the forefront of the news all the time.
Unfortunately, the geography isn't that great.
Exactly, and so. Even though they could have been a movement, they just can't
Sorry.
because of all the ridiculous shenanigans going on.
I mean, you have to consider a couple of things. The first is the Electoral College. When you look at third-party candidates and just how, how much that lowers the chance of a third-party candidate being elected.
Mm-hmm.
Where more so you'll see something like in 2000, where Gore lost because so many votes went to the third-party candidate in Florida, where it became a contested election. So all of this stuff spirals. But ultimately, if you really want to see the points behind the candidate, look at the party's platform. So I wonder what Trump supports. Look at what the Republican Party decided in its July conference. Look at what the Democrats decided in their July conference, and from that you'll be able to see what are their goals for the next 4 years, and then
I do support Hillary's goals for elevating the middle class.
Wait a second, I just want to jump in right there. You said look at the party's goals, but isn't this such a dynamically different election from everything else before? Because now we have candidates who don't really align with their own party.
But I mean, how much can Trump do by himself? Ultimately, he needs Congress.
Clearly, he could do a lot. I mean, he got himself literally to election day, mostly by himself.
I think we're kind of dancing around it and not explicitly stating. It's a broken politics system, and it's just the way it's going to work when you have a populace. Not everybody has the same amount of time or even the yearning to do that much research into a candidate, so you're going to have people playing off these games. That's why you have the ability for Trump to rise so much, not only within his own party, but at the national stage. And I wanted to address something you mentioned earlier, that you want to have a reason to vote for someone, not a reason not to vote for someone. I completely agree. I disagree in that it's not binary. I definitely think that having reasons not to vote for someone is very important, particularly in this election. We speak about unprecedented events, Clinton being potentially the first woman to become president. That's amazing, but we also have the unprecedented event in that one major candidate insinuated that he could potentially refuse to concede. Never in the history of the United States political system has that ever happened. Not only is that, we would like to think that's a ludicrous thing to say, but that's a threat upon the integrity of our democracy to have one major candidate say that. So when I look at that, personally, I think there's a lot of good with Clinton and her policy, whether you care about income inequality, lowering the cost of college tuition, making sure that the Affordable Care Act is a little bit more efficient. There's a lot of good in that, but you also have to look at the terrifyingly horrible, abhorrent, whichever adjectives you want to use. It's frightening. It's really frightening to see one candidate have such disregard for a tenet of democracy.
Actually, if I remember correctly, to the question of whether he would concede, he said, "We'll see."
And then he said in a future press conference that, yes, I will accept the results of the election if I win.
I win.
Yeah.
But to your point, is something that I found really peculiar. Everybody keeps talking about, yeah, sure, Hillary Clinton might win the election right now. It looks like it. The electoral votes are in her favor. But even if she does become president, this election has shown us something radically different. You see that 40% of this country believes in the values of this one man. So what sort of a country is she going to be the president of?
It's not so much that they believe in the values of Trump, I would say. Like, I'm from upstate New York, and that area is, like, utterly, like, for Trump. And I think it comes down to two things. One of them being racial resentment, where, like, you recognize, or the person recognizes that, like, racism is wrong, but doesn't want to do anything to help or to change that. And the other one being the stagnation of the economy, where, like, it's progressing, but it's not where it should be for people, particularly uneducated white men who, like, aren't where they were, say, 12 years ago, before the economic crisis. And so when you put those two things together, that's how you get Trump, where, like, he's basically saying all the stuff that they didn't know they could say out loud, because before you weren't allowed to say those things. But, you know, it's not so much that he represents them as they see him as, like, something that could maybe change that, where Hillary is more so the same.
Or you could just see it as, like, dormant racism that people have just been stuffing down their throat, like, no, we can't say it now. Oh, wait, there's a candidate, a presidential candidate saying it. I can be as racist as I want.
But I think there's nuance
And, like,
between racism and racial resentment.
But, like, that's not going to change. If Hillary becomes president, these guys will still be, like, known as those guys who supported Trump, those racists.
Whoa, okay. Yeah, sure, go ahead with the basket of deplorables comment if you want to. But the problem here, that what I'm trying to understand is, how did the country end up like this? You know, how did America end up like this?
Well, it's one thing to say, well, this guy has a bunch of followers who, you know, and if Secretary Clinton becomes president, you know, how is she going to represent them? But it's another thing to say, well, when you have presidential candidates who are, you know, making it okay to make statements like, you know, insert any Trump quote. Well, you know, when I look to if I'm a young child looking, you know, watching TV, looking to see the leader of the free world, and, you know, when a president makes a State of the Union, any address that he or she gives, the market moves. I mean, with every word, there are people sitting there analyzing every single word and the tone of the speech. So to have a certain type of president that, you know, has no regard for, you know, or has no filter, or, you know, really just goes and says whatever he thinks, that's scary. And that notion of, oh, you know, I have this platform that's reaching millions of people, if not billions of people, and I'm going to use that to discredit, you know, modern day American democracy. I'm going to discredit, you know, major news outlets that you know, people read on the daily. That's a whole nother conversation. And, you know, I'll stop there.
If I may, I think you guys are all hitting the nail on the head. I think there's two other components that lie in different categories. The first of which is, politically, a lot of Americans live in completely polar opposite worlds in terms of the information they're receiving and from what that source is. You can have the self-described moderate who listens to a variety of sources, whether that be CNN, MSNBC, sprinkle a little bit of Fox News on there just to make it a little bit more balanced. But then there's also the two main actors, which are really creating the divide, which are people on the left and people on the right. People on the left, whichever sources you want to look at, which Salon, The Atlantic, which tend to lean a little bit more left, and then compare that to people coming from the right, listening to Breitbart, The Blaze. You have two people colliding with different set of facts, and when you have that situation, consensus is very, very far off on the horizon. I have a dismal view of the political system going into the future. The second component of that, Raphael hit it right on the head, is the economic stagnancy that we're experiencing. It's moving a little bit, not too much, not as much as people would like it to. On the philosophical side, when you have that situation and people are in a position of vulnerability, we have a tendency towards strongman politics. And that's why you see Donald Trump on the rise. And again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but this is happening throughout. You have strongman politics that use scapegoating tactics, nativism, protectionism on the economic side. You saw it with Brexit earlier this year. Mm-hmm. Brexit, what was fueling it? It wasn't a conscious decision to make sure that we are not being subjugated by the European Union, which was not happening at all. It was telling people that if we do not step out of the European Union, we're going to have all these immigrants come to our country and drastically change our culture, which are those dirty politics that we're seeing transpire here in the United States. Mm-hmm. And we'll see if that can be successful in the United States tomorrow. Hopefully we see that they are not. I frankly don't see that disappearing anytime soon, especially after this election season.
Would you say that the elections affected Brexit or the other way around? Or was the strongman happening on its own?
I think the strongman is happening on its own. These are very unique environments with their own political situations, their own economic situations. But in a way, you're seeing the fact that a lot of these countries, it's economic stagnation everywhere, not just in the United States. And when you have that situation, that's when you have the potential for it to cultivate something that's international, which I think we're beginning to see the developing stages for that, which is very dangerous because then you have a very high intensity incendiary situation that could transpire into something that I don't think any of us want. You look throughout history, World War II, a lot of it, what led to that was nativism. It was playing out racism. It was strongman politics, nationalism. To me, a lot of that sounds very similar right now. I don't think we're up to that scale yet, but we need to stop from even escalating a little bit to that.
So when you say we need to stop, there's something that I keep bringing up, and that's been discussed a lot this election, is that the millennial vote and the young people vote is going to count a lot. And even the last few campaign speeches, Obama kept reinforcing the fact that young people need to go out and vote. We're all young, give or take a few years. Most of us are of voting age. We fall in the 18 to 24 bracket, and all of us have friends who are either citizens or who are citizens in their own countries. Why aren't we voting?
A couple of things. Before addressing that, there was you mentioned like news cycles, insinuating that Breitbart and The Atlantic are on the same level. It's
No, I completely understand it, and I should have phrased it in a better way because I definitely don't think they're on the same standard. But you have these two groups who believe that this source is telling me this. It aligns with what I believe politically, so it must be right. Mm-hmm. And the person who's standing in front of me, well, then they're just trying to fool me, or they're trying to get their own agenda passed. I'm not going to let that happen. So you have these people entrenching themselves in their positions. But it's important that you bring that up, and I'm glad you did. And I thank you for that, because that's false equivalency.
Hasn't that always been there? Haven't there always been two sides? There are always going to be people who are on the left. There are always going to be people who are on the right. It's just, this time we are seeing things which we call left and right, but aren't really in
Left
the
and
political
right.
domain. They are more about human interaction and the ways society has evolved.
Yeah, and I'm really sorry. Just real quick, I know you were like in the middle of your point, but in today's age, you can just filter out the other side, the other,
Yeah,
you can go on your computer and delete all your friends who are supporting Hillary Clinton or supporting Donald Trump, or and you can only read the Atlantic and only get one, all these news sources that are, because they're, everyone has a blog, and you can really do a good job at only hearing one side. And that may be the cause of some divide, not being able to interact. When we talk about diversity and the benefits of diversity, it's seeing the good in other people. And when you isolate yourself, then you don't really have those interactions. And I'm sorry that I jumped in there.
That's okay, man. Going back to what you said about young people voting, I'm sure there's studies on this, but I feel like there's a correlation between voter turnout and education, and that I think correlates as well as in colleges. Like young people who are in college settings are more likely to vote, whereas younger people who are apathetic to politics and don't want to learn about these type of things aren't necessarily going to go out to the polls because they're not going to feel like their vote matters when it comes to electing the president. I mean, really a Trump supporter voting for Trump in New York State, or a Hillary Clinton supporter voting for Hillary Clinton in Texas, you see that where people think that their vote doesn't necessarily matter, ignoring down ballot candidates where their vote does matter. So you see a correlation where in presidential elections there'll be massive turnouts, but in 2010 and in 2014 election turnout was horrible. It was 32%.
Yeah.
Because people don't care about those elections, they only care about the president.
Yeah.
So
Those are the most important elections.
yeah.
One of the good things about being at a city university school is we get a majority of our funding from the state and the city. Part of their budget includes funding for our university. And one of the big things when we push voter registration drives and trying to register students, a big selling point is our schools are funded through this budget that your state assembly member, your state senator, the governor, these are the players in that process. And if we don't turn out to vote, you'll see that they're very quick. This is why people think, seniors get a lot of great services provided to them, because they're the ones who are voting and they have the politicians here. They have the time to go out to the community board meetings to, complain, and the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And when we are trying to advocate for students to be that squeaky wheel, it's good to kind of have that as an incentive for students. But that's for us, and there are countless other young people who are feeling disenfranchised and aren't turning out and voting. And we don't even have all of our students registered, and that is such a big factor. So it's very tough. I think one of the interesting things, and we talk about who has time to do what. Young people who are starting their careers and are needing to work long hours and weird hours, and being involved in politics takes time. Reading up on issues, going to your local elected official's office, these things take time. And for younger people, they sometimes feel that they don't have time. And so creating different ways for them to stay engaged in politics is, I think, very worthwhile, and we need to start. And I think with social media and different things, you do see that, but it does come at a cost, and they're receiving filtered information. So I think it's a mixed bag.
This election we've seen extremely palpable effects And there are people, halfway across the world who are encouraging their friends in the U.S. to go out and vote. I mean, this election did a lot of things. It brought voices from places you wouldn't think would be that vested in the U.S. election. You started to realize just how big it means. There's a quote from the show called The Newsroom in which Ann Sorkin writes, and it says...
So good. Such a great show.
So he says, our elections are the envy of the world. And that's pretty true. I mean, yeah, I come from the world's largest democracy, and yet I know, unfortunately, I do know more about the U.S. elections than I do about my own. And I've been trying very hard to find a reason why young people don't vote. That's one of the reasons why the four of you are here. One of the reasons this podcast started, and we have to wrap it up a little soon, was because I wanted to just figure out how can we have such dynamic aspects? Is it just another fad to be engaged in politics? I mean, is that why there are specificity and there are specific things that, hey, you know what? I'm interested in art, I'm interested in politics, and, it just becomes a thing because it shouldn't be, right? This is something that's as general, it's something that's going to affect everybody. So I'm trying to find the source of that apathy.
That's actually what I was thinking of the entire time. I was like, why is our generation apathetic? Why don't we care? Why are we just like, do what you want? And like, to the art student, the person who's involved in arts, the person who's listening to music, the person who's obsessed with music, in fact, I think they have reasons to care as well. Because if you look at the city's funding for the arts,
that's what I mean, right? You can find a reason for every
politics is sort of like the hub of everything, because they control the money. Whoever's in power controls the money, and whichever aspect of like life that you're into is going to be affected by money somehow.
I mean, I feel like there's been a sort of misinformation campaign in terms of politics where people assume that elections don't matter. So, like, that's why, going back to my earlier point, you see these massive turnouts in presidential elections because they're on the news everywhere. People know that they're happening. But then you get, like, the other elections, and you don't necessarily know when that election is.
Is that it? So if we start covering elections more, if there's more media coverage about elections, people will just come out to vote?
That, and there's more information on the importance of those elections. Like, people think that, like, the president is the king of the country. It's the only office that matters. If you elect that one, all of your problems are going to get solved. And then you forget that, like, you interact more with what your state does or with what your city does than you'll ever do with what the federal government does.
You'll never be, well, I'm not going to say you'll never meet the president, but it's very unlikely that you'll meet the president, but you'll see a city council member, in the grocery store.
Exactly.
And,
So when we went out to interview people and we asked them, why aren't you voting? And they're like, we voted for the Democratic Party last time. Our roads are still broken. We are still out of jobs. I mean, that's not something the president does per se. I mean, it's a long way down the line, but that's something that I'm still trying to explore and find out.
Actually, I think he got the point right when he said that the turnout for community board meetings is literally just old people complaining about the most trivial things. Like, if you go there, probably the youngest person you'll see there is like probably a 40-year-old.
A journalism student?
Huh? A journalism student or a 40-year-old.
I mean, they have the time. Like, let's not kid ourselves and say that college students have this massive amount of free time to go to the city council's board committee on transportation.
But it's just half an hour.
But
you
our
have to get there
generation
too, and
consumes information in amounts and at speeds that never before has been seen. I mean, people can be experts at expert levels in multiple fields, and yet it's not lack of information, nor is it lack of sources of information.
And plus, community board meetings, they have their minutes online. So if you just want, like, if you're like, instead of like Netflix for like 2 hours, instead of like Netflix for 2 hours, you could do Netflix for 1.5 and spend half an hour looking at the meeting and say,
but do we do that either? I mean, when was the last time you went, when you were in India, when you were in Bangalore, did you ever actually look up who the district collector was?
I'm going to be super frank. I literally did not even care about it because I was just like, I'm not a citizen. What's the point of caring?
Yeah,
Literally, every time I'd even tried to complain, my friends would say like, you can't complain. You're not from here.
yeah, but still, I mean, that's something that I've been trying to find out.
We're visual consumers. I mean, who's gonna want to read 4 pages of like minutes from a meeting,
And plus,
and then you have to communicate with that board saying, "Hey, I don't agree with this thing you did." You know,
Yeah.
like all of that takes time, and none of that is like interesting. It's like comparing basically like an hour of reading a book
and they're not
versus
engaging enough, I think.
I think
Yeah.
It has to
okay,
be
so
like really snappy.
I was at this UN conference that happened with Mashable, and Hillary Clinton's social media advisor gave a talk there, and he was talking about how we live, the current generation, and most people live in a place where we get information, but we are unable to act on it. Like you will know that this is happening, except when you want to actually have any effect on it, it doesn't. There's that frustration gap that actually clicking a like does not really do much. That so we have on one side we get the information and we are encouraged to act on it, except acting on it is not as easy as being informed about it. And I'm trying to figure out if that's the reason politics doesn't work, because someone once said, what if we have online voting? But other than that, we are informed about politics, we are informed about the election, but actually going out and voting, it just seems a lot more difficult, whether it is or not, whether you have to wake up on a Tuesday morning and go.
Yeah, it's on first. That was the first thing I was gonna say. It's on a Tuesday, like
Exactly.
in November. People have
there's
jobs
a-
and stuff, but
There's a
besides
reason
all-
for that.
Yeah.
But besides all of that stuff and the antiquated notions that have resulted in having it on a Tuesday, more so you see like certain areas where election turnout isn't something that they want. You see, like I was reading an article where in the South, they shut down a whole bunch of like voting stations because they don't want turnouts from specific areas. So you have this clash where like turnout affects who gets elected, and maybe you want to have your school board elections in a random week in May specifically, so it doesn't change. Like that's why people don't get informed, because like the people who are in those positions maybe don't necessarily want to be pushed out of them.
Mhm.
So
I think it's more to do with attention span.
From more apps, the attention span, you could take it as a joke, but I think there's actually.
I know. I mean, like,
there's-
I can't read. I mean, even though I suggested, I can't read the minutes. It's like words and words and
Yeah.
words. I can't.
I think there's validity in that comment, but in a more umbrella term, as it pertains to the process of politics, I think to sum up what everybody was saying, it's not easy, and when something isn't easy, it leads to disillusionment, and I think that's from an abstract sense, that's the sentiment that's driving a lot of young people. I think you see that in the Bernie Sanders campaign. I thought his policies were very intricate, and he focused his campaign on policy. He didn't dabble on, political name calling or political games as much as other candidates. But
Neither does Trump. No, I'm just-
But at the very same time, it was because, as youth, I think we believe that politics is a bang bang game. It should happen quickly, and we want it to happen quickly most of all. But I don't think that's the case. Politics is a long-term game, and to win a long-term game, you need a long-term participation. It's a very simple perspective. I really think that lies at the stem of the issue.
Democracy itself is meant to be not a fight, but a fight. You have two opposing arguments. You have people turning out to a meeting because they're in support of an issue and against an issue, and that discussion, that is democracy. And politics is making sure that both sides are happy and that both sides have something that they want, and the maneuvering of making sure that both are happy with the decision. So I mean, I hear you guys when you're like, it should be quick, it should be easy, but okay, liking a photo should be quick and easy. Participating in democracy and being engaged in your local community or even, your national community, that you should want to take the time and
But why?
why? Because it's everything. It's your livelihood. It's why should I go to my community board? Because I don't want to trip on the crack in the sidewalk. Why should I go to my local congressman or woman? Because my Social Security checks aren't coming.
Because the important things should be hard.
I mean, that's yeah. I don't know. I think I think we
completely
should
agree.
take
I
the
do
time
agree.
And I know we're running out of time, but I just want to add on to something that I think you're completely right. So there's a negative connotation attached to compromise, and compromise is a huge part of politics. If you want to get anything done, you're going to have to compromise. But even aside from that, you look at history, again, going back to Bernie Sanders, his main things were single payer, making sure we tackle income inequality effectively, and making sure we have a good plan for climate change. Those are three big things. Not going to happen overnight. Look at history. You look at labor regulation with FDR. You look at the Civil Rights Act with LBJ. You look at the DREAM Act with Obama. These did not happen because there were three individuals driving it. It happened because there was people in the streets mobilizing, protesting, not only making the president be aware of the fact that they want this, but making the Congress know that they want this. That's where it lies, the Congress. Again, going back, the midterm elections, those are the most important ones. So it's about making sure that we understand the importance of compromise and the crucial importance of mobilization. You're not going to get anything done by just electing the figurehead. Citizens are the most important part of a society and a political system. If we don't understand our own importance, our politics aren't going to improve or go anywhere substantive.
There's a great quote by Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, and he says, the most important public office is that of the private citizen. And if you don't play your part in this democracy, well, then it doesn't work. And you can feel disenfranchised and you can be pissed at the system, but unless you're, and I know some may disagree with this, unless you're, actively participating in it, well, then, you will be, left out. Because if you're, and I notice how I didn't say if you don't vote. So voting is part of it, but there are other ways to be a part of the system. You can, right? So, I mean,
Isn't revolting against the system itself participating?
I wouldn't necessarily. I wouldn't consider it as part
I
of.
think we're going into an area where we're a little farther from topic, but
You want to work with what you can in the system. So, like, going back to Bernie, even though he lost the nomination, he still basically compromised in order to be able to get stuff done in Congress with Clinton. So, like, even though they were at odds on some points, they both know that it's better to work with each other than against each other to get things done. And so I think that's what is meant by the compromise.
right. Well, thank you so much.
of course. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope we all had.
I think we figured it all out.
Yeah.
Yay, now I know who to vote for.
Yeah, Ellie,
Hallelujah.
have you decided who you're going to vote for?
Yes, this conversation has changed my life.
But you're not going to tell us who you're going to vote for?
Obviously
tossing.
not. I know that. That's like the basic thing about voting. Never tell anyone who you voted for.
All right. Thank you so much for coming in, and NYU Journalism thanks you.
We think NYU Journalism.
Yeah.
I'll hold my thanks on NYU Journalism. I'll thank the host.
All right. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our show for tonight. This is your host, Arthinath. Thank you for tuning in.
Until next time.
That's all.